Sharon Aheer, Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism and the Status of Women, the Honourable Minister Prasad, Panda, Minister of Infrastructure, Nicholas Bell, President and CEO of the Glenbow Museum, as well as the board members and staff who help keep the Glenbow open and accessible to all Albertans. Now please help me welcome the Honourable Jason Kenney, Premier of Alberta, to say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matt, for that introduction. Thanks to the whole Glenbow community for welcoming us to this cultural jewel in Alberta. Thanks to Ministers Aheer and Panda as well for their presence. As we are gathered in a museum that is a vital repository of our proud history, I'd like to begin by recounting the story of its founder, Eric Harvey. An Ontario-born and raised lawyer and combat veteran of the First World War, Harvey moved to Alberta permanently after the war, and he built a law practice here while dabbling in the oil and gas industry. In those days when a lot of dry wells were drilled and a lot of hopes were lost. But he persevered. And then ultimately, the remarkable 1947 Leduc No. 1 well was struck on February 13th, 1947, making Harvey incredibly rich and launching Alberta on a path to unprecedented growth and prosperity. Mr. Harvey was an extraordinarily generous man, extraordinarily generous with his wealth. In fact, he vowed to, quotes, die broke. I don't know if he managed that, but he certainly gave an awful lot of what he generated to some of our province's biggest and best cultural institutions, including the Banff Centre, Heritage Park here in Calgary, and, of course, $5 million plus his vast collection of art and artifacts to found the Glenbow Alberta Institute in 1966. I think this is a story worth recalling for a number of reasons. It reminds all of us that much of what we value about modern Alberta was built by folks like Mr. Harvey and other adventurous, successful, entrepreneurial mavericks, many of whom are profiled here in the permanent exhibition of the same name, using wealth generated by our bountiful supply of natural resources. Another reason to retell Harvey's story is because we're repeating some of that history here today. His founding $5 million donation to the Glenbow, $40 million in today's money, was matched by Premier Ernest Manning's government of the day. And that financed the construction of this building, which opened back in 1976. It has served our province very well over the past 4.5 decades, but it is way overdue to undergo a new vision and a major upgrade. The leaky roof and structural decay in this building are a serious threat to the invaluable cultural treasures that are stored here, treasures that belong to the people and the province of Alberta. I understand that something like 99% of the collection is not on public display because there's not enough space, and the invaluable collection in the floors above us, which belong to the people of Alberta, which likely have a notional monetary value of tens of millions of dollars, but an inestimable cultural value, their safety is threatened if we do not invest in renewing this building, this institution. It is therefore time for government and private philanthropists to come together once again, as we did in the 1960s and 70s, to revitalize the Glenbow, to ensure that it is here for generations and decades to come, to guarantee its future as one of the central cultural institutions of this province, one of the repositories of our history, and one of the greatest tourism draws in the future in this province. And so I am very pleased to announce today that the government of Alberta is committing $40 million to facilitate major upgrades and the complete renewal of the Glenbow. This will help the Glenbow achieve its goal of raising a total of $115 million, and we hope that the provincial contribution will be matched by a federal contribution of an equal amount. And we encourage the City of Calgary to support this central core cultural institution in the center of this Alberta's largest city. With the support, we hope, of generous private donors, and I believe today's commitment will make it much easier for the board, the volunteer board, to go out and find those contributions. We believe that we can revitalize this building and transform the museum into a world-class public art gallery in Calgary. You know, Calgary is the only major city in Canada without a significant standalone public art gallery. And that is not acceptable. And the vision of the board and the new executive team here at the Glenbow is to give us that world-class art gallery which puts Calgary even more on the global cultural map. We believe that will help in achieving our vision of doubling tourism to Alberta in the years to come. And it will be a sign that even during tough times, even during a time of fiscal restraint, Albertans are prepared to invest in our quality of life, in our cultural life for decades to come. And it is also an obligation of our generation to preserve the collection of this museum, which is now increasingly under threat because of a lack of investment in the structure of this building for nearly 5 decades. So with the transfer of the Glenbow's priceless library and archives and its Indigenous history materials to the University of Calgary, this project will also help the museum reinvent itself, as I say, as a dedicated public art museum. With its fabulous art collection of art, including some of the most inspiring landscape paintings of the Great Northwest, and an amazing array of Indigenous arts, much of which you can see in this room, along with its incredibly varied collection of Alberta and historical artifacts, the Glenbow is ready to take its place as one of the top cultural institutions in Canada in a new and stronger way. Upwards of 150,000 people a year visit the museum. They learn a lot about who we are, about where we come from, about our stories. And honestly, as an Albertan, you cannot come away from this place without feeling proud of our history and proud of the people who went before us, beginning with our Indigenous people. And I want to commend the board and administration of the Glenbow for having achieved surpluses in recent years, having adopted a new business plan, brought new visitors to this place, and we want to, as a government, to encourage that kind of entrepreneurial success in our cultural institutions. For 2 years running, The Economist magazine has rated Calgary as the most livable city in North America. And folks, as I go to Toronto and Montreal, Wall Street, Bay Street, London, and around the country and across the world to attract new investment to this province, part of the value proposition isn't just that we have low taxes, isn't just that we have an entrepreneurial culture, but it's also that we have a remarkable standard of living, a quality of life, in part because of cultural institutions like this. So I am so excited by the vision of the Glenbow board, of the revitalization of this core cultural institution. The government of Alberta has made significant investments in recent years in supporting our cultural institutions and preserving our history for future generations, like the recently opened Royal Alberta Museum in Edmonton, which was the result of a huge contribution by the taxpayers of Alberta, and the Alberta Art Gallery in Edmonton, and other cultural institutions around the province. But if we cannot preserve and protect this museum that belongs to the people of Alberta and its collection, this is a moral obligation of our time. And that is why, even during challenging fiscal times, we have made this important decision. So I look forward to being here in a couple of years. Let's get it done quickly, Nick. to see the vastly new and improved Glenbow that will be there for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Premier. I would now like to invite the Honourable Leela Aheer, Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism and the Status of Women, to say a few words.
Thank you, Emily Jones, Premier Nicholas, and Minister Panda. It's such a huge privilege to be with you today, especially in this beautiful room. You can see some of the incredible art that's on display here. I'd also like to acknowledge our Indigenous partners, our Métis and Inuit brothers and sisters and First Peoples. We acknowledge the Blackfoot Confederacy and the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai, Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, including Chiniki, Wesley, and Bearspaw bands, and the Métis Nation Region 3. It's so proud for us to be able to stand here on these shared properties, and as the Premier always says, our first people were the very first people who traded and lived, and were the first entrepreneurs of this province. So it's a huge privilege for us to be able to share this space. Je vous remercie d'être ici ce matin pour assister à cette importante annonce. It is such a privilege to be here as Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism, and the Status of Women. Albertans are cultures from all over the world and our First Peoples. And whether you just got off the airplane yesterday and are a brand new Albertan or Canadian, or whether you've been here for generations, this space is for you. And les Albertains et les Albertaines représentent des cultures partout sur la Terre. Notre histoire est enrichie de leurs récits où s'entremêlent lutte et triomphe, the pain and the beauty, the amount of time that we've spent becoming Canadians and Albertans, and the great sacrifice that is made by so many to be here. Those stories have shaped our communities, and it's given us the province that we truly love today. And that's why the Glenbow holds a very special place in my heart. I've been coming here since I was a child. And whenever I visit, I learn something new, not about the world in the past, but also about future artists and future musicians and the people who form the cultural basis of this province. When I was a child, there was so many significant pieces, but one of the things that the Glenbow does so well is repatriation. It's very, very important of First Nations pieces and collections, but also, I don't know if you've had a chance to see the new installation of Vivian Mayer and through the eyes of so many of these new artists that view the world in a very unique and very beautiful way, which gives us pause to look at who we are as a culture. The Glenbow's founding purpose was to promote and encourage the knowledge of the human race, its arts, its history, and the nature of the world in which we live in. And there's arts and textiles, and as the Premier was saying, and the historical objects, and to know that they could be at risk for not having this infrastructure built is heartbreaking. And Premier, it's $163 million worth of is the value of the collection that we have here. So it's not a small collection, and as the Premier was saying, this collection actually belongs to Albertans. It's your collection. And we have a responsibility to make sure and protect and maintain this for future generations. So, c'est évalué à plus de 163 millions de dollars. It's a huge investment. It's a huge Canadian and Albertan investment. And Alberta deserves to have, and Calgary deserves to have, a space where we really, truly show who we are as artists and the culture, and to really be able to attract people to come here for jobs and prosperity, but to stay because their livelihoods are honored and respected in this province. We stay for culture, we stay for arts, we stay for the beautiful things that we have here. That's part of our livelihood. So the $40 million capital funding is an important investment and will ensure long-term sustainability to this beautiful space. And will ensure that the art that is held within these walls will be enjoyed by generations of Albertans to come. So our government believes in this project. We believe it is crucial to preserve our memories and our collective stories. For all Albertans, these are our arts and our culture. With spaces like the Glenbow, I'm absolutely certain we'll be able to share these with tremendous pride. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Minister. And now I'd like to invite Minister Prasad Panda to say a few words.
Thank you. Good morning. And I'm really happy to join Premier Kenney, Minister Aheer, and MLA Jones on this important announcement. As Minister of Infrastructure, I'm very pleased to join this announcement because projects like this will create jobs and grow the economy. And Premier actually like he said, even during challenging fiscal times, we're finding it important to fund projects like this. As you know, Premier promised guaranteed funding for health and education and other social services like communities, seniors and housing, and mental health. So that put departments like infrastructure and culture in a tight spot to find finance to fund projects like this. But he also convinced us, saying projects like this will improve quality of life, which will attract investments, when he's doing a sales pitch in London and outside of Canada in these difficult times. So we are committed to continue build critical infrastructure projects, mostly healthcare and learning facilities in education, and also some museums like this, because that will create jobs and grow the economy. But we are going to partner with all levels of government, City of Calgary, particularly federal government, which has an obligation to partner with us, because it's not just the three levels of governments. There is a lot of private philanthropists and entrepreneurs who are generous in the past, but now, because of these economic conditions, that is crippling their capacity to contribute. We hope our federal government take note of that and work with our government. But we are happy to fund this project, and I look forward to work with the Board of Glenbow to finish this project on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. And now Nicholas Bell, President and CEO of the Glenbow, will say a few words.
Thank you, MLA Jones. Thank you, Premier Kenney. Thank you, Ministers Panda and Aheer. It is an honor to stand with you on such an auspicious day for Alberta. As a new Albertan, I've only been here a few months, I feel particularly humbled to speak on behalf of our staff, our Board of Governors, and the many supporters who have given so much of themselves to make this museum exceptional. Today's announcement is transformational for the future of culture in Alberta. It not only allows us to address critical issues with our building and in the protection of the province's collections, your collections, it also provides an unprecedented opportunity to revisit how this museum can better serve our community. Glenbow has witnessed the extraordinary growth of this city and province over the span of our institutional life, while welcoming millions of Albertans through our doors since our founding more than 50 years ago. We recognize the value museums bring to all peoples as sites for the discovery of meaning in the world around us. This is where we reconcile our past with our turbulent present and seek clues to a common future. In that spirit, your support permits us to embark on a new journey at Glenbow, to reimagine how these rich collections and this space can be activated in our drive to create one of the most ambitious and progressive museum programs in North America. Investing in spaces that encourage and inspire such dialogues isn't just good for conversation, it's also good for business. Supporting Glenbow ensures our institutional sustainability while underscoring the role culture will play in contributing to our economic recovery. Infrastructure isn't just roads, airports, or trains. We invest in culture because it creates jobs and attracts the talent we need to help Alberta grow and thrive for the future. Building this cultural infrastructure increases Alberta's relevance on the global stage. We know public support for culture lays the foundation for civic engagement and understanding that strengthens a society. Across Canada and the world, people we haven't yet met are asking themselves, should I move to Alberta? What will I find there? Should I do business there? What are this province's values? Today's critical support from the province and people of Alberta sends the right message, that we are doubling down on a half-century of success at Glenbow to lay the groundwork for the next 50 years. All of us will benefit. Premier, ministers, you have breathed new life into one of Canada's leading museums at a time when Albertans are hungry for signs that we remain strong as a community. Every person who has experienced Glenbow, and those we will welcome in the future, can celebrate this news and it's on behalf of them that we thank you today. Thank you.
That concludes the announcement portion of this event. I will now turn it over to the Press Secretary for the Premier, Christine Myatt, for the Q&A.
All right. Just a reminder that there is a mic to your right, and we ask that you use that. And go ahead.
Sorry, short people problems. Mr. Premier, a big story that dropped yesterday was the Buffalo Declaration from a group of Calgary MPs. What are your feelings around this and sort of using this threat of separation to force a better deal, in their words, from the federal government?
Our government was elected on a mandate to fight for Alberta. That's exactly what we're doing. It's exactly why we're in court challenging the federal carbon tax, challenging the No More Pipelines Law, Bill C-69. It's why we launched the Fair Deal panel, and it's why we are prepared to go to Albertans with a number of ideas to maximize our autonomy as a province, to defend our right to develop responsibly our resources. And that work is being done by the Fair Deal panel right now. So our focus is on listening to Albertans about how they think we can best get a fair deal in the Federation. And we will be having more news in the throne speech to come next week and in the legislature session to begin next week. I want Albertans to understand, however, that we do have allies across the country, that all 13 premiers have agreed with the concept of energy and resource corridors that need to get built, that 9 of the 10 provinces are supporting our fight against the federal Bill C-69, that I think 6 or 7 provinces are supporting us in our fight against the imposition of a federal carbon tax, a decision of which will come out from the Court of Appeal next week. And 13 for 13 provinces and territories support the concept of the vision for liquefied natural gas to help to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions while creating jobs here at home. So we've made it as clear as day to the Prime Minister and his government that Albertans not only expect but demand respect and fairness in this federation, and that we are prepared to act if we end up with federal policies that further injure our economy, for example, should the tech mine not be approved. So we're focused on practical ways to fight for fairness in the Federation.
And since you're giving such full-throated support for this fair deal as your premier right now, how come you didn't seem to have such fervent support while you were an MP, particularly in the past?
Well, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I was part of a federal government that did not impose a carbon tax in Alberta, that didn't impose a No More Pipelines law in Alberta, that did, in fact, add additional federal seats to Alberta, that did appoint out senators elected by Albertans, that increased by $1 billion Alberta's annual health transfer, and did so on a per capita basis. I belonged to a federal government that gave our prairie farmers marketing freedom for their grain, that repealed the Liberal Long Arm Registry, which penalized law-abiding Alberta hunters and farmers. I belong to a government that was elected with massive majorities by Albertans because they approved of what we did for fairness in the Federation.
Premier, can you respond to criticism that your government's move to end the AMA agreement and push through with these changes is hurting patient care and could drive some physicians out of the province?
So let's put this in context. It will be zero reduction in physician compensation and zero cuts to healthcare. In fact, our healthcare budget is going up. What we're doing is slowing the growth in health spending. Because, as a province, we are facing an $8 billion deficit. We're headed, if we don't take action, to $100 billion in debt. That means spending billions more on interest payments to bankers and bondholders and less on infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and physician services in the health system. That is both Dr. McKinnon's panel and the independent Ernst Young performance report of Alberta Health Services confirmed that Alberta has by far the most expensive health system in Canada, but not the results to justify that. We have lower than average life expectancy, higher than average infant mortality, and longer than average surgical wait times, even though we spend 20% more per person than the average amongst Canadian provinces. The single largest reason for that is compensation. 55% of the $55 billion spent by Alberta's government goes to public sector compensation and benefits. The largest single portion of that is physician compensation. As the McKinnon panel underscored, Alberta physicians are by far the best compensated in Canada. And we honor and respect those physicians, our medical practitioners, as well as our nurses and everybody in our health system. Many of them do heroic work every day. We recognized that just 2 days ago by our announcement to virtually double the Lougheed Medical Center emergency ward. And we recognize it in our commitment to maintain health spending and maintain physician compensation. But we cannot allow that physician compensation to continue to grow much, much faster than our population or than inflation at a time of real fiscal and economic challenge. So we are turning to our great doctors to say, please work with us to find more efficient way of delivering services, fair ways to be compensated. According to the McKinnon panel, the average GP in Alberta grosses nearly $100,000 more than the average amongst GPs across the country. In today's current fiscal situation, that is not sustainable. The vision of our Minister of Health, Minister Shandro, is significantly to increase the percentage of our physicians, our GPs, who are compensated through alternative reimbursement plans, like as we committed to Albertans in our election platform, to replicate the great success of the health in your constituency. It's the Chinook. the Crowchild Health Network, Primary Health Network, where they're compensated through ARPs. They get better results at lower cost. We want to see that spread across the province, and we want to work thoughtfully and constructively with our physicians to make that happen.
And just a second question, just your response to reports out there of more than 40 Nobel laureates calling on the Canadian government to reject the Tech Frontier proposal.
Well, I think that often you see these mass letters signed by folks who don't live in Canada and don't always understand the details. In this instance, the Frontier Tech mine would operate at 50% of the carbon intensity of an average barrel of oil produced in North America. And 50% of the average barrel of bitumen produced in the Canadian oil sands, because of the application of cutting-edge technology. The Tech Frontier mine is supported by all 14 nearby First Nations in northern Alberta. Chief Alan Adam of the Athabasca Fort Chippewa Nation just reconfirmed that yesterday in media. And so those First Nations see this $20 billion investment that would create 7,500 jobs and create $70 billion of government revenue as an opportunity to move their people from poverty to prosperity. And we embrace the imperative of reconciliation. Reconciliation, first and foremost, means giving Aboriginal people a way out of poverty. And the partnerships that have been signed with Teck Mines, one of the most progressive mining companies in the world, with the highest amongst the highest rankings for corporate social responsibility and environmental and social governance standards amongst the global mining industry. Teck has committed, by the way, to a net zero carbon plan by 2050 as a global company. I suspect these are facts that many of those signatories were not presented when they signed that letter. I suspect they were presented with a distorted view of this project. But let me tell you, in this province, we can't sustain infrastructure like this without revenue like that. It's just that simple.
I just want to go back to health for 1 second. As you mentioned, $5.4 billion, that's staying the same. But a lot of physicians are convinced that this, in the long run, is going to mean more work for them and less money in their pockets. So my question is, especially after Bill 21 and yesterday's announcement, what are you doing to restore the confidence of health workers in this province?
Well, I think what we're doing, first of all, the minister has listened to concerns and has brought in a gradual path for transitioning to a more sustainable model of compensation. I think there was, frankly, some, well, I'll be diplomatic and call it misunderstandings about the government's intention. And so, for example, one point of contention was on changing the time before physicians can charge what's called an extra charge for complex modifiers from 15 to, I think, 25 minutes. And he's delayed, he announced that will not happen for at least a year. In the meantime, we'll be accelerating the opportunity for those GPs to move to ARP, a form of compensation, including capitation, like the Crowchild Medical, Primary Medical Network here, Crowfoot, here in Calgary. So I think once our physicians sit down and actually look at what the province will be offering, they'll see that this is entirely reasonable. I'm confident they will still end up being the best compensated physicians in Canada. So I'm not sure where the people talk about leaving the province. If they want to leave the province with the best compensation and the lowest taxes, I hope they wouldn't do so, but it wouldn't be very sensible, wouldn't be a very logical decision to make. At the end of the day, the proof is in the numbers. Our budget for Alberta Health Services, our budget for physician compensation is not going down by 1 penny.
And then I guess off that a little bit, whether it's healthcare or education, especially before the budget, are there any plans to, I guess, bring more incentives so people outside the province want to come to Alberta and work here? Maybe we can particularly focus on rural healthcare because that's a point of contention.
Well, that's the obsession of our government, is getting the start economy going again. And here's some good news. Alberta's population is growing again. We're projected to have amongst the highest rate of population growth in the country this year in 2020. And so people, notwithstanding our challenges, they know Alberta as a place of opportunity, and they see the signs of hope and optimism for the years to come. And one of the ways we do that is by keeping competitive tax rates. Our opposition, apparently they want us they think it's not good enough that our physicians make $100,000 more on average than they do in other provinces. Instead, they want to raise taxes on those physicians. They want to spend more and tax more and borrow more. That is not the path to prosperity.
Hi there. When the issue of unpaid property taxes by oil and gas firms sort of boiled up, you made some comments about how the government would work with municipalities. Has there been any progress on that? And what
on which? I'm sorry.
So the issue of unpaid property taxes from oil and gas companies to rural municipalities.
Okay.
There was some discussion about how the province would work with municipalities. Has there been any progress on that? Any work done? What do you have to say to these?
I think that those discussions are ongoing. I think that Minister Madhu just met with the president of the Rural Municipalities Association earlier this week. I will be speaking to, I think, the spring RMA conference coming up. And so those conversations are ongoing. I can tell you that the province, we unilaterally provided linear property tax relief to dry gas producers earlier this year. I think it was in the range of $25 million retroactively while we work on a new assessment model. Because here's the problem. The decades-old assessment model is based on a totally different world. Through much of the past 5 years, our dry gas producers have been losing money with rock-bottom prices, often negative prices. And yet their valuations are based on a totally different price environment. So we don't want to see all those gas producers go bust, and then guess what happens? The municipalities have no source of revenue. So that's why we're working on new assessment rules. We're doing so in collaboration and consultation with the rural municipalities. And in the meantime, we are extending our tax relief for another year for dry gas producers.
There was some talk of, you can't wring blood from a stone. We've been told that not all of these companies are broke or insolvent. So why wouldn't you insist that companies that can pay do pay their tax bills?
Well, of course I insist that companies pay their tax bills. My point was, in some instances, I was asked a couple of weeks ago about some companies that no longer can pay their bills. If they're in a negative cash flow position and their balance sheet has been run down, and they go to a municipality and say, can we work out a deferral or something? Sometimes the choice is between that and shutting down the operation and having zero revenue. So obviously, we underscore that we expect all companies to be good corporate citizens, to pay their taxes on time. My point is, we are in a very challenging economic environment. And when there's some companies that have laid off all the staff they can't borrow any more money, they can't raise any money on the equity markets, and their balance sheet has been nuked, that's a reality that we can't just ignore. We have to work on that. We'll take more questions. I want to apologize to the Glenbow folks for no questions on the announcement. This is how it rolls. This is welcome to my world. So, all right, carry on.
I'm going to stay on that train. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I am a Glenbow member, but
okay, so
I have a question about that. I just wanted to circle back to that letter from those Nobel laureates, and I just wanted to clarify a little bit. Like, is your sense that these 40 Nobel laureates, many in the fields of physics and chemistry, have been sort of sucked into this, what you've called an extreme foreign financed campaign to landlock energy here? I mean, have they been sucked into that? Is that what you're saying?
Well, boy, that is a valiant effort to put words into my mouth.
No,
I did not say that. I did not intimate that. I said I suspect many of them did not have before them the full facts on this case, because the opponents of this mine don't want people to know the full facts. The opponents of this mine don't want people to know that this would be the lowest emitting oil sands project in history. The opponents don't want people to know that this would be one of the lowest emitting oil field projects in North America. The opponents don't want people in Europe or elsewhere to know that 14 for 14 approximate First Nations support this project. And the opponents certainly don't want folks to realize that in the real world we have a choice between Canadian energy and OPEC dictatorship energy. According to the International Energy Agency, there will be a growing demand for crude oil between now and over the next 2 decades, and a significant increase in natural gas demand. Even in the IEA's most pessimistic scenario for oil consumption, which is what they call their fully Paris-compliant sustainable projection for 2040, they project that year, I believe, 67 million barrels of oil being consumed in 2040. Either those 67 million barrels come from a rights-respecting liberal democracy with the highest environmental, human rights, and labor standards on earth, i.e. Canada, or they come from Saudi Arabia, Iran, Venezuela, and Vladimir Putin's Russia. I think the global environment, human rights, labor rights, political stability would all be better off with projects like Frontier supplying that energy rather than Vladimir Putin or the OPEC dictators.
Sure. Just to follow up, though, so I mean, wittingly or unwittingly, it's your sense that these Nobel laureates have been drawn into that campaign. That's my question.
Look, I haven't read the letter. All I know is that there's letters like this signed not infrequently, and what we have seen, I can tell you this much: what we've seen engaging with European capital markets on some of these issues is that there is, in dealing with the questions around environmental, social, and governance metrics for investment in energy, there has been a great deal of misinformation. Many interest groups have been misrepresenting the Canadian oil sands as being the equivalent of thermal coal, for example, which is manifestly ridiculous. It is counterfactual. Here's my view. Why would these groups, why would they focus single-mindedly, obsessively with shutting down Canadian energy while giving OPEC and Russia a pass? I think the question answers itself. It's because there's no way they could cause the Saudis, the Iranians, the Venezuelans, or the Russians to shut in their energy. Our own Prime Minister said that no country with 170 billion barrels of oil would leave it in the ground. What our challenge, and I'll be saying more about this next Monday, our challenge is to show the world the path forward about how we can extract energy with a shrinking environmental and carbon footprint. That's exactly what we'll do.
Thanks. So that was a yes, though. They're part of it.
Thank you.
Premier, I was wondering if you expect you will get an opportunity to meet with the Prime Minister to discuss the concerns about the blockades?
Likely not, but we did speak to him last night. All 13 premiers joined the Prime Minister in a conference call. I expressed our grave concern. I underscored that not only is this having devastating impacts on working people today, it is scaring away investment from this country. It is suggesting that we cannot operate as a modern democratic country based on the rule of law. I also underscored that we need, in the spirit of reconciliation, we as elected government leaders need to demonstrate respect for the democratic decision-making process of our First Nations people. There have been 10 tribal council elections in the Wet'suwet'en communities over the past decade, all of which have resulted in councils and chiefs who support the Coastal GasLink project. And I'm very concerned that we not end up undermining the legitimate elected authority of First Nations leaders in a case like this. I also underscored that I'm concerned that if we see in some areas police not enforcing court orders, then increasingly I'm concerned that citizens may do so. We've seen elements of that already. And I would much rather that the trained and properly authorized police ensure that court orders are enforced and the rule of law is maintained.
Any assurances from the Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister told us last night that the Government of Canada's patience is wearing thin. He said that he believes that action is required within hours and not days, that they continue to try to reach out to some of these protesters. But I got the impression that the Government of Canada understands that action will need to be taken.
Just one tech question. They announced this morning that they'll be looking at a $1.3 billion write-down if the mine isn't.
That's right, because they've invested that much in the project to date.
Does that mean anything for investment for other companies?
Well, it would look. If tech is vetoed, it would send a devastating message to prospective investors in this country. And as I said to the Prime Minister in December, if they veto this project, then his comment about phasing out the oil sands apparently becomes the policy of the Government of Canada. And that would be completely intolerable to the people of Alberta, which is why I said if that happens, our action will be swift and serious.
Bonjour, Monsieur Kenney.
Bonjour.
J'aimerais savoir, c'est quoi votre impression par rapport à la déclaration de Buffalo qui a été envoyée hier par les 4 députés albertains?
Par qui?
Par Michelle Rumpel et
c'est ça.
Albertains. Oui.
Alors, écoute, notre gouvernement a été élu sur un mandat de lutter pour l'Alberta et pour la justice à l'intérieur de la Fédération canadienne. C'est la raison pour laquelle nous faisons les consultations auprès des Albertains. Et nous avons déjà pris l'action. Nous poursuivons le gouvernement fédéral en cours contre l'imposition de taxes sur le carbone fédéral et contre le projet de loi C-69 contre les oléoducs et dans plusieurs autres égards. Alors, à la suite de consultations sur le marché juste pour l'Alberta, nous prendrons davantage des actions pour défendre la province. Alors, je crois que la lettre de Mme Rumpel souligne qu'il y a une inquiétude grave et profonde ici en Alberta. Ça souligne la frustration et ça renforce pourquoi le fédéral doit prendre l'action pour démontrer qu'il y a un avenir économique pour cette province.
Et par rapport à la rencontre justement avec Justin Trudeau là, par rapport au blocage hier, qu'est-ce que vous trouvez qui est sorti de cette réunion-là? Et puis, est-ce que vous êtes satisfait de cette discussion?
J'ai pris l'impression que le Premier ministre et le gouvernement du Canada perdent la patience en ce qui concerne ces blocages illégaux de nos chemins de fer et de notre économie nationale. Et moi et plusieurs autres premiers ministres provinciaux, ont exigé que le Premier ministre prenne action pour défendre les règles du droit et les emplois au Canada.
Merci. This will be the last question.
Mr. Premier, we're aware of the work that's being done by the Fair Deal panel, but I was wondering if you've had a chance to read this Buffalo Declaration, and do you support it?
You know, what I support is this government delivering on our mandate to Albertans, which is exactly what we're doing to fight for the province against the imposition of the federal carbon tax, against C-69, we've put out the most constructive ideas for getting a fair deal in the Canadian Federation. And I've been clear that we are prepared to accelerate those proposals, many of them, if we get a veto on the Tech Frontier project that has been approved according to the highest environmental standards after a 10-year-long regulatory process. So I think what that letter underscores is, because I have not read it in detail, but I think what the letter underscores is just the depth of frustration. A lot of people are going to come to the table with a lot of different ideas and a lot of commentary. All of it underscores that the frustration of this province is deep and genuine. Okay? I'm sorry to Glenbow folks that there were no questions, but hopefully there will be.
No, I actually have one question about the Glenbow.
Oh, voila! Okay, we can.
But it's in French. Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Donc j'ai une question sur le Glenbow. Vous avez dit que ça allait créer des emplois. Est-ce qu'on parle uniquement d'emplois temporaires pendant la phase de construction? Est-ce que ça va créer des emplois sur le long terme?
Principalement, évidemment, ça serait les emplois de construction, quelques centaines des emplois. Pendant une période, je crois, de 2 ans de rénovation, de construction. Mais ça serait un élargissement de la musée à long terme. Et je crois que ça va représenter les nouvelles occasions pour les emplois. But I better not commit to that. Nicholas, the question is, do you speak French? Are you guys going to, is this project, apart from construction, going to create new jobs?
Yes. So thank you very much for the question. I hope you won't mind if I answer in English. Apart from the construction work, we have developed a new business plan that will see us go through the renovation and into a period of increased sustainability, and we project that will create several permanent positions. The precise number will be defined in the coming months, but there will be new jobs at Glenbow.
Okay, merci beaucoup.
Thank you. All right, thanks everyone.